Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been a lot of talk about the procedural issues we're facing today. I would like to focus my remarks for a moment on the merits of this legislation and on some of the criticisms that have been made earlier today and in recent months about the merits of that legislation. These reforms are at the heart of what many Republicans have been calling for, and for reasons that astound and escape me, are somewhat unique to Republicans right now. The criticism that's often leveled is that these reforms that Republicans are seeking, those dealing with things like the Flores Agreement, reforms to the TVPRA, reforms to our asylum laws themselves and the standards that have been abused by drug cartels in order to engage in human trafficking, that those reforms would somehow undermine humanitarian protections for children and for other vulnerable migrants. Not only is this not true, but it is the opposite of true. It gets the formula exactly backwards. You see, far from protecting children and other vulnerable migrants, the Flores Agreement, the TVPRA, and our asylum laws, the way they're set up without these reforms, exacerbate the problem, and they incentivize further human degradations, the very types of human degradations that we all respond to with a certain degree of shock and horror. For example, it is precisely because of the Flores settlement that we're required to release child migrants after 20 days. And because of the TVPRA, we cannot place most migrant children in expedited removal. These rules in tandem guarantee that if a minor is brought to our border, he or she will be released soon after being apprehended. Worse still, though, if the child arrives with an adult, the adult can exploit the child to his or her benefit. The consequences of this regime are as horrific as they are predictable. These rules and the way they are abused, without the necessary reforms that we're proposing, end up facilitating truly heinous acts of human trafficking and of smuggling. Children are brought to the border by cartels who know that the U.S. government will essentially complete the trafficking route for them at the end of the road by releasing the child into the interior, in some cases to sponsors who claim to be relatives but are in fact only the final link in the human trafficking chain. The fates of these children are horrible. What they suffer is grotesque. In many cases, we know that these children are sold into sex slavery. In countless cases, we know that these children are being traded, bought, sold, even rented. We have one of many examples that's occurred just in recent weeks and months of a 51-year-old man arriving with an infant child, claiming that child to be his own, only to discover after the fact that the child was not his own. He ended up admitting that he rented this child in order to cross the border illegally, which he had done several years earlier. These smuggling routes are well-worn, they are well-known, but most importantly, they are built on the backs of our own laws, laws that are crying out in need of reform. We know from past data that nearly one-third of all the women brought through these trafficking chains end up being subject to sexual abuse along the way. And so these are the laws that are encouraging that. We've got to reform them. That's what this bill calls for. So you can say you disagree with the policy, but don't call this a violation of humanitarian concerns. That's exactly what we're trying to solve. Thank you.
It's 11 o'clock.